In Clinico, we want to make an appointment for a patient for a health coaching call. So click on the spot, the day and the time that you want. Make sure it's the right type of appointment. This one here is a health coaching call. Check that the time is right, and then you need to find the patient and put the patient details in and create the appointment. So now that we've got an appointment in the schedule, when it's time to make that call, we go into the patient file and we go into treatment notes. So every time we have a conversation, we are going to create a treatment note about that conversation. So the practitioner will also create notes in the same patient file. The practitioner notes are blue, so they do look a little bit different. And the value of putting all of this information into Clinico like we do is that it creates a timeline, so that if you want to look back at patterns or like a timing sequence of any sort of symptoms or changes, you can just go in here where all of the treatment notes are and look back and be able to pick out what the pattern or the timeline looks like. So when you're talking to your patient, you are making your notes in barriers, whatever the topic is that you're talking about. So it might be digestion, and they might be saying, bowels are great, give you a little bit more detail about what's happening with them. And then you might go across to stress, for example, and give some feedback on meditating every day. And here also, when I'm having a conversation, I often take their own language. So they might say to me, I've had enough, I can't cope. The reason I find that helpful is because if you can use their language, often you can mirror their language back to them, but also you get a sense of their mindset and where they're at. Certainly, again, from a progress perspective, when you can look back, you can identify the tone of the conversation. So if the patients are the type of people who experience, waves of emotion and ups and downs, you can see if, you can just track it. I kind of just think there's some value in holding their own words, but certainly you can, and it doesn't so much matter what you make the headings. It can be anything that's relevant. It could be if they have sinus stuff, you can report on that. So if you frame it like this, it means that when we go back and look at their notes, it's really easy just to drop in and identify the different parts. We might be wanting to look at one particular thing. In the action points, you don't always have to put something, but if I've given them some suggestions or we've agreed on a strategy going forward, it might be like 10 minutes of meditation in the morning. And then at the end of the conversation, I'll actually copy and paste that. So copy it once I've saved their file and go into the patient details. And then I send an SMS and I actually message that to them, whatever my recommendations or whatever our agreement is, just so that they've got a little snapshot. It's only ever one or two little things. So that's where we go for treatment notes. Typically at the end of a conversation, I will ask them at that point when they would like to speak again, and then we come across to book a new appointment, and that'll take us back to the calendar, and then we can choose, when and where, and just pop it in where it suits. So if your patient has sent you some information through Slack and it's something to do with symptom changes or anything that seems really relevant to their health story, you would go into your Slack message, just Control V, copy whatever that message is, go into the patient file, go into treatment notes, add a treatment note, and just paste whatever it is into there and create a new one. We can save the files as final. The only one we don't save as a final but as a draft are home tests. So oftentimes our patients will, in fact almost always, they'll be given the bicarb test, the transit test and the sugar tests. And so because they come back staggered over time, but we want to keep all of that information together, as they feed that information back through Slack, you copy paste it in. So you might say transit, 14 hours, you might say 3 days later, you might get bicarb results and say 2 minutes, and then they might send you another one a few days later. So each time they send you one little update, you can just save it as a draft. Next time they send you through some information, just find the home tests, health coaching note, edit it, and go in and then just add whatever the next bit of information was. Part of my communication with the practitioner is that when I do have relevant updates from patients, anything that's concerning, needs attention, or I need some advice from the practitioner, I'll either write a separate note to the practitioner in Slack through the practitioner health coach channel and say, this patient has blah, 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 what do you recommend? Or I might copy some of the details of our chat and send them across to the practitioner in Slack. And so that is just part of that continuing sort of cycle of communication, that I want to keep my practitioner up to date with what's happening with patients, and then I want to be able to get back to the patient with whatever it is that he has suggested or recommended.